So happy Mother's Day, everybody. I'm so happy that you guys are here. Everybody looks so lovely. This is your first time here, or if you haven't been here in a little while, we have a series that we've been in called The Table. And basically, here's the way it works, is that on week one, when we started, we had this idea of this particular table. And this particular table right here is not just any table, but this is a special table. It's actually our main table. Hang on, we're giving away our points here. We're going to go to the title slide up there. And this is our table that my wife and I bought when we first got married. So you can see it under there. It's got all sorts of scratches and all sorts of character, as we like to call it, right? It's got a lot of character on it. And so as we had this table and as we sat at this table, we had a lot of memories here at this table. In fact, we got married and we bought this, and then we had kids and people came over, and then we got rid of it. You know how that goes. But in the midst of all of it, we had a lot of good memories that's been here. But on week one, and if you didn't see week one, if you weren't here, I would urge you to go back onto Facebook and look up week one of this series called The Table, because on that very first week, what we said is that even though this is our table, and even though this is the table that we have, sometimes the enemy likes to take a seat at our table. Right? He likes to squeeze his way in, and he's really good at that. And so if you didn't watch week one, I urge you to go back on and look at week one, because it's a very important message that we have. And then last week we said, all right, so if somebody's not going to be at the table, if the enemy's not supposed to be at the table, then who is? And the person that is supposed to be at the table is Jesus. But it's not just Jesus, right? It's not just Jesus. In fact, it's King Jesus, right? Because if you look at the way it is now, if you look at where he is now, he is sitting next to, in the right hand of the Father, as King. And as King, that's where he is, and he will come back as King. And so Revelation chapter 3 says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you open the door, I will come in and dine with you, and you with me." Which means then that you will be able to be together at the table with the King. That's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal that every day the King wants to be at the table with you. And so as you're at this table with the King, that's why I think today, on Mother's Day, it's a really appropriate message as we finish. Because as we finish this series, what we're going to talk about is not who's not going to be at the table, or not who is going to be at the table, but now we're talking about how we can invite others to our table. And I think one of the things that we can agree on about moms is that moms, they're really others-focused, right? In fact, I think that moms are so others-focused that we could call this holiday Others Day, and it would still be appropriate, right? So turn to the person next to you and say, "Happy Others Day." Oh, you guys follow directions really well. That's great. Yeah, Happy Others Day. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how you can have others at the table. And in fact, we already have the first point up on the screen. So that's point number one up on the screen. If you're taking notes, is that we can be together at the table. Because together at the table, this is what moms like to do. They like to bring everybody together at the table. And that's really where we're at today, and the focus that we're going to have. Because as you think about this, as you think about being together at the table, the idea is now that you have been at the table with the King, and now you want to invite other people together with the table. That way they can understand a little bit what it's like to be at the table with the King. I was thinking about it like this. A lot of times, moms, when they get people over to the house, right? You get people over to the house and you sit them down at the table, and then depending on what age bracket they're in, you know, you're going to go and make some pizza rolls, right? Like pizza rolls if they're teenagers, and pizza rolls if they're old people as well. Like, we all love pizza rolls. So long you can make it, and you sit down, let me serve you, let me give you all the food that you want, let me make everything really nice at the table. But that's not exactly what we're talking about today. It's not about putting people together at the table. The idea is that what's going to happen is that you're going to sit with people at the table, that you invite people at the table with you. So let me explain it to you like this. When a few years ago, several years ago, I took a group of teenagers to New York City on a mission trip. So as I went to New York City on a mission trip, my uncle's showing up. I'm just going to call him out. Everybody say hi to my uncle, everybody. And He's just.
I tried to text you.
No, it's cool. It's cool. No, they're all happy to see you. I'm sure they're all happy. So as I took this group of teenagers on a mission trip to New York City, my good friend, Big Greg, lived there at the time. And so I would go back and forth to New York a lot. And so we started getting used to people and getting to know people. So I brought a group of teenagers to New York. And what happens in New York is it's pretty cool. Like, they don't get a lot of credit. New Yorkers don't get a lot of credit, rightfully so. But there's some things they get right. And some of the things they get right is that in particular villages within the boroughs of New York City, Manhattan and Brooklyn specifically, what they do is they figure out that there is a large homeless population that's there, granted, but there's also a large population of people that they still work 40 hours a week, but they just can't afford to live in New York, right? And so what churches got together to do is they figured out that if you're living within this one particular village, hey, you don't have to worry about food. The churches are going to take care of you. So what they've done it for years, for decades, they've done this to where you say, hey, if you want breakfast on Monday morning, the Methodist Church on 5th Street, they give you breakfast, no questions asked. Then if you want lunch, the Lutheran Church on 16th, they'll give you lunch that day. And what they've done is all the churches within the particular village, they have one meal a week that they're responsible for, and so nobody will go hungry within their village, right? That's pretty nice, right? Isn't that good? Right? That's what I'm telling you. New Yorkers don't always get all the credit they deserve. And so what I did this one time was I took a bunch of teenagers and we went from church to church and we started serving some of the people that were there. Until I got to one particular church, everything was the same. And this one particular church that I went to, we showed up there and when they went to the table, we started doing all the work ahead of time and they set up the table real nice, but they had on the nicest tablecloths. They had on the nicest centerpieces, the nicest plates and the nicest silverware, and they had the nicest food, to be honest with you. And we talked to the people there, and they said, you know what, we want people to feel like when they come here to eat a meal, like they're special. We want this to be the most special meal that they have all week. We want to make sure they know just how special they are to us. Oh, that's great, I love that. So as they figure out just how special they are, I say, all right, so what do you want us to do? Well, I need half of you guys to serve. Right, so I want them to sit down and I want them to be served. So they're going to get their food. You're going to be like a waiter to them. Great, excellent, right? We'll be waiters to all the people sitting on the table. What else? The other half of you, I want you to sit at the table. Now wait a minute, sit at the table. So what you want me to do on a mission trip, as we went all the way out to New York City, is you want me to come and sit down at the table. And now as I sat down at the table, this is exactly what they wanted me to do. Because now what happens is that when you sit at the table amongst the people, you realize that they are no longer a project, but they're actual, legitimate people. And there's a big difference between serving somebody at a table and sitting at the table with them. And so as we sat at the table with the people in New York, a lot of them homeless, a lot of them were just in the street corner as I was walking in, we got to talk. We got to talk about everything. It was the day that LeBron James happened to say that he was going to go back to Cleveland, and so we all talked about that. So we sat around the table, we talked just like every normal conversation I've ever had in my life. We sat around and talked at the table. And I realized that there is power. There is power when you sit at the table. There's power when you're together at the table. Because what happens when you're together at the table is you start to rub shoulders with the people that are at the table. And when you rub shoulders with people at the table, there's a lot more power in rubbing shoulders with people at the table than there is even serving somebody at a table. So today, as we continue on, as we look at our first point, which is together at the table, I want you to think about this idea. I want you to think about what it is like to be together with somebody at a table as opposed to serving somebody at a table. And in this, I want to show you a verse in John chapter 3. And if you have your Bibles, just open up to John chapter 3. Because there's a verse in John chapter 3 that is very overlooked, often overlooked. And for good reason, because if you think about John chapter 3, right, you have the story of Nicodemus. And Nicodemus comes to Jesus and they have all these questions. He was in the shadows of the night. And then we get to John chapter 3, verse 16, right? We know that one. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Then you go to verse 17, "For I did not come to abolish the law, but that in me law might be fulfilled." And we have all these beautiful verses that many, many scholars have spent years and years and years and lifetimes trying to dissect and look at. But then you get to this verse in verse 22. And it's kind of a throwaway verse. It's kind of a transitional verse. It's a verse that people don't look at a lot. But in verse 22, it says, after this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside where he spent some time with them and baptized. Now, that doesn't sound revolutionary. That doesn't sound life-altering. However, if you look at this verse in the original language, it says that after Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, after he gave them John 3:16, which is the most powerful verse that we know of in Christian history, then it says that he went out and he spent some time with the disciples. And when you say spent some time, the word that's used there is the word diatribo. You can write this down if you have notes. It's diatribo, diatribo. And the idea of the word diatribo is to rub shoulders with. So what Jesus did was he went and he got the disciples together and they rubbed shoulders together with the disciples. And you know what happens when you rub shoulders with Jesus? He rubs off on you. Rubs off on you because the more time you spend with somebody, the more you become like them. In fact, if you dads today, because I know what's going to happen today. You guys are going to go and you're going to say, all right, moms, you don't have to cook today. It's your day off. We're going to cook for you. Which men in the room, you guys know what this means. Come on, let's be honest. A lot of us have bought steaks already, right? Like we're just going to throw a steak on a grill and be like, look, we cooked, right? Because that's what we do, right? We throw we burn stuff, we heat stuff up, we put stuff outside, and then we say, look, we cooked. And so as we have our steaks today, and you get your steak, and you get your nice steak from Publix, right? And you get your nice meat, and your nice cut, and it's there, and you're like, oh, the moms are going to appreciate this. Because now you got to season it. And you get your rub, right? Like some people like to marinate, and you can marinate, but if you haven't already started marinating your steak, don't bother, right? It's done, it's over, right? It's too late now. So you may as well go to Publix today after this is over and get some rub, right? And you get some steak rub, and you get your steak, and you rub the flavoring, the steak rub, into the steak. And as you rub it in, you guys know what happens. It starts to saturate. It starts to get in. Man, you guys are hungry now, aren't you? It starts to get in, and now the flavoring of the steak starts to change. And that word that we use to rub the seasoning into the steak is the exact same word, diatribo. The exact same word to rub the seasoning into the steak is the exact same word that was used when Jesus was rubbing shoulders with the disciples. Because here's the idea that happens. The idea that happens is that when you're sitting at the table with the king, when every morning, when the king is knocking at your door and it says, behold, I stand at your door and knock. If you let me in, I'm going to come in and sit at your table and we can rub shoulders together. And as you and the king are rubbing shoulders together, the more that you rub shoulders with the king, the more you become like the king. And as you become like the king, then you invite other people to sit at your table. And then you start rubbing shoulders with other people. And you start rubbing off on other people. And the other people then don't become like you, but they become like the king. Because he has rubbed off on you. Because that's who you've been rubbing shoulders with. This is the entire idea of what unity actually is. What unity actually is, when you look at unity in the Bible, when you look at us being together and united as one, the idea is all the things we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks. You keep the enemy away from the table, you sit at the table with the king, and then you invite other people around you so that a little bit of the king that rubbed off on you can rub off on them. This is the idea of unity. And as we think about this idea, I wanted to read some more verses here for you, because this is what Jesus prayed. When Jesus prayed, and you think about like if Jesus ever prayed anything, that's got to be pretty important, right? If you think about anything that Jesus ever prayed, you got to be like, well, all right, let's take notice of what Jesus prayed, because maybe we can pray very similar things. It's a great call, Robbie. I think it's exactly what we could do. And as he prayed in John chapter 17, he actually prayed for you. He prayed for me, he prayed for you, he prayed for all of us. He prayed for the future people that had not even been born yet. And now listen to this prayer that he prayed. He says, my prayer is not for them alone. And now he's talking about the disciples, the people that he's around right then. He says, I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. That's us. People that will believe. People in the future that will believe. We are now in the present, but to Jesus, we are his future. Verse 21, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. It's the beautiful verse and the beautiful prayer that Jesus prayed about unity, about us being together at the table. But as Mr. Anglin shows us the next point, the next thing that you have is not just to be together at the table, but now it's to build trust at the table. And I'm going to let you know that I have quite a big surprise for you guys today. I have quite a big surprise for you guys today, that your socks are going to be knocked off. Is how big the surprise is. The surprise is so big that we've only done this one other time, and it was last Mother's Day. I'm going to ask a very special guest to come up and talk about trust at the table on this particular Mother's Day. Will you guys please put your hands together for the mother of my children, my wife, the director of operations of Extraordinary Church, Mrs. Heather Blewett!
All right, so this is something that's always dear to me, something that God is always working on in my life, so I wanted to kind of go through it with you guys. So I want you to think, if you've ever gotten a gift or something that you're like, wow, I don't deserve this, or you maybe feel like it's just too much. Have you ever felt like that? Yeah, we all do, right? We're like, well, that's too much. Have you ever felt like you've held yourself prisoner with your thoughts? Raise your hand if you have. Yeah, we all do, don't we? Especially us women, I feel like. Well, today I want to tell you that God, is our very great reward, and He wants us to know that we deserve what He has for us. That you can trust that when you come to sit at the table, that He wants to redeem you. That He gave His Son, His blood, His bruised and broken body to pay the bail money. Some of them men went to jail training yesterday, and they learned about that. He paid fully. He didn't just pay a down payment or the bond. He paid in full the money, the ransom, the blood to get you out of prison that you've built around yourself, that you've allowed others to build around you. He paid it, and you deserve it. He paid the price so that we could sit at the table in a palace with our Lord and King, that we get to do that one day in heaven. And His greatest act of love brought us into the family to all who belong in Him. That comes from Romans 8:17. So moms, women, even you brothers and sisters and dads, and am I forgetting something? Brothers? I don't know if I said that. I want you to know that today all of this applies to you. Romans 8:38 through 39 talks all about how we don't have to work for love. You know, we all work for stuff all of our lives, and we still work, and we're just always trying to improve and get better. I know that, you know, especially right now, it's just so hard. You have to survive. You have to just keep working and working. So I want you to know that today you don't have to work for love. We get to live from love. If you've ever been loved, or if you have a child that you love so much, they don't have to earn our love, right? We love them, and when we show them that love, they get to live from that, because He has given all of His love to us, and we cannot be separated from it. And that's from Romans 8:38. But we have to receive it. So when we have trust in Him, we don't let our own deceptions and beliefs and lies make us feel like we aren't worthy. Because when we sit at this table, here at the table with Him, we find healing and transformation and acceptance, and His love releases us from the prison that we've built. We are found worthy of His love. Doesn't that sound nice? So if you're willing, the Holy Spirit will shine His light on you in your unhealthy ways, your unhealthy thoughts, your ways of thinking, and He'll open up the door for you to choose new mindsets and then empower you with the grace to change, because we can't do it on our own, that's for sure. He's prepared a table a lot nicer than this for us, an invitation to His presence. I love that last song that the ladies sang, which they did awesome, by the way, that may His presence go before you. Like, He wants us to be in His presence, and it's so humbling. So He has that invitation for us all the time, which has no substitute. He desires for us to sit with Him and to release us from captivity. Don't you want to be free? Yeah. Thank you for that. He wants to rescue us from ourselves and to lead us on a journey to wholeness and a life that flourishes and has a meaning and a purpose. I tell James all the time, you do not want to know what is going on in a woman's mind. It's dark in there, right, ladies? It's just, we can't even explain it. We can't even understand it. You just don't want to know. So let his presence free you from that, all that goes in your mind. At his table, the King of Kings table, we find our identity, and we're taught to live from love instead of for love. Then, like James was saying a little bit, we are to invite others to our table and teach them how God can love them and set them free. We can't just keep this freedom to ourselves. We need to tell others how they can be free from their prisons. I love this verse in Psalms 23, 5-6. It says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Don't you just love how God, he's kind of like showing off to the enemies, like, look what I've given them. He prepares a table full of all that he has for us, displaying his overflow in our lives. So there's so much peace and rest in that. Don't you agree? Yes. Thank you. Our prisons, our enemies, we don't have to worry about them because guess what? They're not a threat to Jesus. He's our Lord. He's stomped the enemy. He's under his heel. So if you find yourself in a prison of broken down mindsets or fear, or you just can't get past yourself, then come. Look, there's 2 seats. God always has for you. Come and sit at the table with the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And sit and let him free you. Because remember, he has already paid that full price, and you can be set free so that you can help others come to sit at the table. There's always room. Because we want those around us in the city of Brandon, our family, our friends, our neighborhoods, to be set free as well. But in order to step into the fullness and freedom of what God has for you, guess what? You have to be willing to come and sit and engage with him. Take the time and sit there. Because at the table, you will learn your identity as a son or a daughter of the Most High King. What a privilege that is that we have. But remember, you have to choose whether you're willing to make that step. So don't let your pride or your insecurity or your weariness or your fear or anything else hold you back from coming to the table. You must trust that you are worth the journey. Remember at the beginning, we do deserve the love and the price that he paid on the cross for us. So even if you don't feel like it, you just need to keep trusting and showing up. Even on those days when you don't want to get out of bed, just keep coming. And have friends around you that encourage you to keep coming. We often dream of a life that flourishes, but sometimes we're unwilling to set our pride aside and walk out of our prisons. We like being prisoners sometimes, right? We just want to have pity parties sometimes. But we can't keep believing the lies in our heads. And we can't be embarrassed to admit our flaws. Our lack of trust and our pride will continue to keep us captive until we lay it down and humble ourselves before God. And remember, he's a gentleman. He's patiently waiting for us. So ask yourself right now, do I really want to be free? Or do I just like the idea of freedom? Think about that. Do I really want to be free? Or do I just like the idea of freedom? Am I willing to do what it takes to get out of this prison? Or do I want someone else to do the work for me? Do I want them to go sit at the table for me? We all want to be free, right? But sometimes we let ourselves get in the way. We all desire freedom. But freedom sometimes means something different for us. Maybe you're saying, I've been through some stuff. Maybe you didn't have the best relationship with your mother or your father. Maybe they weren't even around. Maybe you've experienced trauma or abuse or shame or fear or anxiety. Maybe you've walked through some dark seasons that have stuck with you and they still own you. Maybe you've had broken relationships, loss, pain. But let me tell you, all of those things I just said, I've been through. My mom abandoned me for a few years. I didn't know where she was for a few years. I've been abused. I've been through more trauma than a child should go through. I've had loss, I've had pain, I've had shame and fear and anger and discontentment. And I've walked through some of the darkest times that felt like literal hell. But guess what? I survived because I came to sit at the table with the King. And you can too. No matter what you have been through, you can come and sit at the table with the King. But I had someone invite me to sit at the table with them who was sitting with Jesus already, and they knew that I needed to be there. So when I sat down at that table at 12 years of age, my life was changed. And I still went through some dark times. Most of that other stuff was after I accepted Christ. But guess what? I kept coming to the table. There were literal days that I just felt like I couldn't do anything else but just cry and listen to God's voice and listen to worship music. So let me tell you, I've been where you've been. Maybe not some of the same situations, but I know the pain and the losses and the trauma that you've been through. And I chose that day on my bathroom counter at 12 years of age, I chose to come and sit at the table. And I've had a peace that surpasses all understanding that has helped me get through all of the dark days after that. And you can have that too. Because of the price that Jesus paid by sending his only son, now I can sit, I can walk, I can run, I can dance in freedom. You don't want to see me dance though. And guess what? You can do all of those things. He has given us a way out of our prison. So the question now for you is, do you want to sit at the table with me and partner with God to do what he needs to do in your life? Remember though, it's up to you. So I want to end with this passage from Galatians 5:13 through 14. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love, like inviting other people to come sit at the table. That shows them love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. So I encourage you to read those verses again later and to just let them soak into your mind and your thoughts. It was Galatians 5:13 through 14. Let it be like a mirror that you look into and a guide for your heart and your mind. And then just keep trusting God and keep coming to the table so that you can walk and run and dance and do all the things in the freedom that he has for you. So if you've been putting it off, coming to the table to sit in the presence with the King, and let today be the day that you stop avoiding that. Let today be the day that you choose to sit with the King. And like that song said, may his presence go before you. Amen.
So guys, I don't know how to follow that except for this. Is that what she's described and what we're describing here today is that we sit together at the table. We kick the enemy out of the table. We sit at the table with the King. We rub shoulders with the King. We rub shoulders with other people, and then they can also rub shoulders with the King. And when that happens, then you build this trust and you build this rapport, and you understand that God loves you, that the King sits at your table and he loves you, and you can walk in that freedom. And then you get to my very favorite part. My very favorite part of the entire series for the last 3 weeks is this next point. Because you don't just sit together at the table, you don't trust at the table, but you also have some tasting at the table. And my goodness, isn't that good? Don't you just love to taste? You know what? I've sat at this table, this very table in my life, and I remember sitting at this table and my wife cooking, like right when we first got married, and it was like, oh, am I going to like it? Am I not going to like it? You know, you guys remember those days? Luckily, she was a good cook. I didn't have to lie. But when we sat here, and then I would cook for her, and then she did have to lie, and so we'd sit. I remember feeding my son here at this table, feeding him with baby food, sitting here. I remember sitting at this table and having some really delicious meals that's been prepared. I remember having some other people that I know sit at this table and prepare meals. And one of my favorite things about sitting at a table is that when you sit at a table, you get to taste at a table. And my goodness, do I love to taste. In fact, you know what happens is that when you think about this, when you think about the idea of tasting and all the different tastings that happens, what happens is that when you sit at the table, it's a whole lot different than when you sit in a classroom or when you sit at a desk. Right? Think of it like this. What if as a mom, other moms in the room, you got to invite somebody over to sit at the table, right? And so they're sitting at your dining room table, and you tell them, you say, hey, you won't believe this, but I am a great cook. You know, so you tell them this. And so they come over to the house, and they're trying to smell, and they're like, I don't smell anything cooking. I don't see anything being prepared. And you sit down at the table and the mom just comes over to you and says, yeah, I'm a really great cook. I can cook this, I can cook that, I can make this dish, I can blanch things, I can roast things and Dorothy things. I don't know, I just went Golden Girls on me. But I do all these different things and I'm a really good cook and I'm very skilled in cooking, and then you just say, all right, now it's time to go. Right? That doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't tell somebody that you can cook and then not let them taste what you can cook. Right? When somebody comes over to the house and sits at the table, you don't want to tell them a bunch of facts about cooking. You want them to taste and see that it is good. And when somebody comes and sits at the table with you after you've been in the presence of the king, after you have diatribo, after you have rubbed shoulders with the king, and now you're rubbing shoulders with somebody else, you don't just want them to have facts about who God is. You want them to taste and see that He is good. This is a verse that comes straight from the book of Psalms. Psalms chapter 34, verse 8 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him. See, I think what happens is that the more that you're around the king, the more other people want to come to your table. And they want to come to your table not because you know all the facts about God, not because you know all the details about who Jesus is, but because they want to come to the table and taste and see that the Lord is good. You see, I could tell you today about a guy named Vernon Rudolph. Probably you guys don't know who Vernon Rudolph is. You probably never heard the name Vernon Rudolph. But I could tell you about Vernon Rudolph. I could tell you facts about Vernon Rudolph. I could tell you that in 1933, Vernon Rudolph bought this recipe from a French man in New Orleans about these yeast-rising donuts. I could tell you about Vernon Rudolph. I could tell you facts about how in 1937, he opened up his very first donut shop. I could tell you some facts about Vernon Rudolph and about how in 1937, that donut shop that he opened was named Krispy Kreme. See, I could tell you facts about Vernon Rudolph. Or you can taste and see that the Lord is good. As you taste and see that the Lord is good, you know that this is a lot different than me telling you about Vernon Rudolph. I told you about how much profit margin he made in his restaurant. I told you about how many different Krispy Kremes are around the world. You wouldn't care. But then when I say, Uncle Robbie, taste.
Twist my arm.
And see. When I say, Anthony, taste and see, or pass it on to somebody else. When I tell my mom, because it is Mother's Day, taste and see.
Thank you.
You see how different it is? You can just smell the aroma in the room. I could say taste and see. Go to my sister-in-law, Megan, and I can say taste and see. See how different it is? You just pass it on down, Jim. Just grab that and pass it on down. You know what? We could talk all about the facts about who God is. We could tell you all the do's and the don'ts of the Bible. We can talk to you about 10 Commandments, and we can talk to you about eschatology and about Christology. We could tell you all the different facts about who God is, but I don't believe that that's nearly as life-changing as if you can taste and see that the Lord is good. See, when you taste and see, when you taste and see that the Lord is good, it's a whole lot different than just learning some stuff. Now, don't you agree? We've had an experience, haven't we? We've had an experience, haven't we? We've had an experience because when you taste and see that the Lord is good, man, that is an experience that's life-altering, that's life-changing. Like the very first time I ever had one of these. That's life-changing right there. I said, you know what? You could taste and see that the Lord is good. And our job on this Mother's Day, our job on this Other's Day, is that we are to find as many people as possible to come to my table. Come to my table. And when you come to my table, what we're going to do is we're going to diatribo. We're going to rub shoulders together. We're going to sit together at the table. And when you sit together at the table, I'm going to rub shoulders with you and you're going to rub shoulders with me. And you know what's going to rub off? The King is going to rub off. You know what's going to rub off is that you are going to sit at that table and you're going to be a little bit more like King Jesus every time you sit at that table. And our job on this Other's Day, what I want you to remember today is that our job, our role, is to bring as many people at the table as possible and allow them to taste and see that the Lord is good. You guys join me in a word of prayer. Dear God, we love you so very much. We thank you, God, for just how amazing you are. And God, the one thing that I know is that you are a good God. So when you experience the goodness of God, when you taste and see that the Lord is good, that it is life-changing, that it is life-altering, that you are never, ever the same again. So God, today I pray that if there's anybody in this room, they've learned the facts about God, they know they've come to church to hear about God, but they haven't tasted you, Lord. I pray that today is the day that they can taste and see that the Lord is good. I pray that today is the day that we come together at the table, that we trust at the table, and we taste at the table. And we know that in your goodness and your mercy and your love, that our lives will never, ever be the same again. Dear God, bring your fire down on this place. Bring your love down on this place. Bring your grace down on this place, God, so we can taste and see that the Lord is good.